All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 805 Uncensored. Or if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. The 805 Uncensored is a podcast about leftist politics, history, music, and more. Tonight, joining me on the show, we have an exciting cast of some of our regulars. We've got Heather,
Hello.
Daniel,
What's going on, everybody?
Brandon, and Taj. First things first, happy Small Business Saturday, and shout out to any of our small business owners that listen to the show. You guys have any small businesses that you wanted to shout out before we get into the gist of it?
Yeah.
Swap meet.
Yeah,
I mean,
I was thinking about it when I read your email, and there's a pet food store over by Ralph's in Camarillo.
Pet Supply.
Pet Supplies.
Love
and
that
I'm
place.
telling you, if you go in there and you talk to the owner, he will stand there and talk to you for like a fucking hour about dog food. And he has helped me so much over the years with my dogs and their diet. And so I love that. I love that fucking place.
I go there so much. We've racked up a shitload of points. Yeah, they always comment on the food we buy too, because me and my girl go over the top on the money that we spend on our pets because we try to get the best stuff possible. And yeah, you're totally right. He knows a lot about dog food. It's amazing going in there every time.
Yeah, he's great.
Daniel, did you have one you wanted to shout out?
Yes, absolutely. So, especially for you in Camarillo, Heather, I should I'm send you a picture of the cards. But so my wife just opened her massage therapy place in Camarillo called Expanding Wellness. Super dope. So that's what it looks like inside. Super cozy.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, she got a sweet spot in Camarillo. So it's right off Lantana in Daly, right behind the Wood Ranch, right there.
That's
That's
awesome
awesome.
spot.
Yeah, so she's in a build, like an office building. So she's super legit. She's been doing massage for like 8 years, but she was doing it mobile and working for other people before. So she's finally got her own spot. So super excited. She's open for business Wednesday through Sunday, 9 to 7,
Nice.
10 to 7.
Congrats to her. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll try to
That's
attach a link in the show description too, so people can check it out.
Awesome. I'll send it to you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, everybody go check her out. She's super amazing. I was her school test dummy, so I can attest to her
Nice.
qualifications.
Taj, did you have any businesses that you want to shout out from Ventura County?
Yeah, the swap meet. Go check it out, bro. Right there right there at the college, the Ventura College. There's produce, there's food trucks, clothing, all that.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I wanted to shout out the Lookout. It's a badass restaurant in the Channel Islands Harbor in Oxnard, and they have some amazing clam chowder. Really friendly staff, and great place to get a beer with a great view.
Nice.
Okay, first things.
I got a few.
Yeah,
That's
Brandon,
cool.
go ahead.
Since I'm a vegetarian, it's kind of hard to find like vegan and vegetarian places sometimes. So in Simi, we got Bamboo Cafe, which is local and it's a Vietnamese food, but they have a decent selection of vegetarian stuff as well as other stuff. And also in Ventura, we got Fatty Vegan. If you guys haven't gone there, it's pretty sick. It's
Nice.
I don't know how it's run, but I know a bunch of punks own it, and it's a pretty cool place. Good environment, nice people, decent food. So check them out too. And that's what I got.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. So first things first, I wanted to talk about consumerism. So consumerism is an economic theory that states since the economy is primarily consumer spending based, individuals who consume goods and services will be better off. So obviously here on this podcast and as leftists in general, we reject consumerism for many reasons, but mainly because of its ecological, social, economic, and deeply psychological consequences, which we'll touch on later. Materialism itself is a very cringe concept. When we as human beings insist on prioritizing, having the biggest and best stuff, and so to speak, keeping up with the Joneses, in air quotes, we lose much of our humanity. Not surprisingly, there are several highly compelling studies indicating that consumerism and living a materialistic lifestyle leads to a life of depression and anxiety. This podcast episode will be about exploring the radical potential of Christmas and the holidays. Christmas in particular, because that's the holiday that I'm most familiar with, but I'm well aware that there's other holidays that are celebrated like Hanukkah and Kwanzaa. And how we could envision the holiday season in a manner that's much more egalitarian and detached from the toxic impacts of capitalism. So I already hear people saying it in the background for the holiday season. Capitalism isn't forcing you to go to the store and buy stuff. So nobody's saying that.
Yeah.
Although I would argue, because of what I mentioned above, that there is sort of a societal pressure in the US in particular to buy large quantities of things. But that aside, this year seems like it could be an outlier. We're in the second year of the COVID-19 pandemic. Americans are quitting their jobs en masse. Prices are skyrocketing, and for the first time that I can recall, really ever in my life, Americans in large quantities are asking themselves, do we really need all this stuff? Do we really need to make the holidays as expensive and chaotic and stressful as they are? And the answer to both of those is, of course, an emphatic no. Also, going off what I just said, where capitalism isn't forcing you to go to the store and buy stuff, as leftists, we encourage people to only take the things that they need and leave the rest for others. It directly correlates to the Karl Marx quote, from each according to their ability to each according to their need. The same people that aggressively support capitalism are the same ones that do the same for consumerism. This is because consumerism is simply a byproduct of capitalism, and consumerism only stands to benefit the bourgeoisie. So, I wanted to quote the English painter Ben Nicholson. He said, "The corruption of the American soul is consumerism." I wanted to ask each one of you what your interpretations of that quote were and what you think about that. Whoever wants to take it first. Daniel, what do you think about the relationship between consumerism and the American psyche?
So I think that, this is a really interesting discussion that I've been trying to have with people, that like the essence of capitalism and free market itself isn't inherently evil, but when it's left to its own devices to run rampant and unchecked, that's where we run into the problems. Where greedy people can take and keep, they will. And so we see that the greediest rise to the top as they exploit, step on, and hoard instead of sharing the fruits of the workers' labor, because it's never, almost never, the workers that are the wealthy. And so that and the push for the constant need to buy more, and the capitalist corporate mentality that we have planned failure, like that's a known thing, where the corporations spend millions of dollars in research and development to find out exactly how long certain materials will last, and they make the warranty run out right before that. So they need us, like, instead of just allowing us to buy an item and then go get it repaired, and people to just buy when they need, there's this constant need for more and more and more, and to push us to get things that we don't need. Like, I feel like the millennials are the first generation that doesn't have like a nice set of dishes. Like, you know what I mean? Not the ones that you eat off of, not that we can't have nice things, but like a second set of just fancy dishes for when other people come over, so that you look nicer than you are, right? Like, so that's that extra stuff. Like, we've got a set of dishes that are nice. We invested finally, instead of having a bunch of hand-me-down stuff. But so we do have a nice set of dishes. It's not that that's another thing I want to push back, that anybody on the left, anybody that's a socialist or anything like that, we have to live in a burlap sack and can't have nice things. Like, no, it's not that we can't have nice things.
Socialism is when poor.
Right. What we want is for everybody to have nice things. It's not that we don't want people to have nice things and you can't go get, a nice haircut or have a nice set of dishes. But we also push back on the fact that we don't need a second and third set of dishes for when we have fancy people come over. Number one, to hoard extra stuff that we don't need, buy things that we don't need. And then also to put on this false air of sophistication because of the material wealth that we've accumulated. So I think that absolutely ties into all of that. That's the corruption, is that where we believe and buy into, and it becomes a family tradition that you have to have a nice set of china or a nice set of dishes. And that's where I feel like it is the corruption. It's not just, some people buy more things, is where it actually becomes embedded in our social traditions, is that if you don't have these extra things, you still don't have enough when some people still don't have the bare minimum. So that would be my little take on it.
Absolutely. Really well said. Thank you. Heather, what do you think about the relationship between consumerism and the American psyche?
Well, I wanted to pick up on the dishes.
Yeah, I think that's a really
Because
interesting perspective. I've never
yeah,
heard anybody put it that way.
yeah. But it's a good point because when my husband's grandmother passed away about 5 years ago, his mom gave me her china. And it's this like huge, tub of, I mean, it's very big and it's very heavy. And I feel like getting back to kind of your point, Jordan, about like the psyche and how like these things, it starts to have an impact on your psyche. Because I started to feel like I was obligated to like use these things. And right before the pandemic, I think the Thanksgiving before the pandemic, I ended up inviting like 30 people like to our house for Thanksgiving dinner. And I had a he was 2 at the time, a 2-year-old at the time. Okay. He was just about to turn 3. And I'm like cooking this meal for like all these fucking people. And the whole reason why was because I felt like I was obligated to like have this occasion to like use the stuff that I have and to like show off our home and like, just like you mentioned, keeping up with the Joneses, and it just that's why I think I'm grateful for the pandemic because it kind of like made me realize this is such bullshit, and it's like not like it doesn't like I don't feel value like using these things and showing them off, and so I think that all this stuff just really does have like that profound like ability to like either make you feel obligated to use it or obligated to have it.
Mhm.
And then when you start to ask yourself like, well, why do I feel obligated to have this china? Like, you start to realize how much like emotional baggage you're carrying.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I'm carrying all this like emotional shit from like my husband's family and his grandmother and his parents, and it builds up. And when you start to say, you know what, I don't want to have this fucking china in my house. It's too much. I have to clean it. I have
Yeah.
to keep it. I have to store it. It's like, it makes me feel like I'm obligated to entertain people when I have kids and I've got other stuff in my life. Like when you start to like look at your stuff and I don't want to be like cliche with the whole Marie Kondo thing, but when you start to look at it in terms of whether or not like it adds emotional value to your life,
Yeah.
like it feels so much better to be like, you know what? No. and I feel like Daniel, back to what you were saying about millennials, younger generations are less attached to their stuff. And I don't know if it's a product of just like the world that we live in. The generation at like my kids, my daughter in particular, who's 17, her like group of friends, I mean, a lot of them lost their homes in a fire and they lost everything. So they don't ascribe like emotional value to their things anymore because
Right.
they've lived through such like a different, you know, um, you know, relationship with stuff than we have, with stuff they had and they lost. And
Hmm.
I think it's so tied, like you said, it's such a good point about the psyche, and how it's so psychological. And so for myself now with, shopping for Christmas, I'm trying to really like not fall back into those old habits too, and
Yeah.
I just read, you were mentioning that you feel like this year maybe things have changed, but I read that it's like $2 billion are expected to be spent online over the next day. And I'm just like, my God, what you could do with that money, you
Yeah.
know? And I worry that, like, as a culture, we're falling back into those behaviors, and what is it going to do for our psychological,
Yeah, I really
Yeah.
wonder the same exact thing. And proponents of capitalism are constantly saying, "Well, it's great at producing things." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it produces way too much things. It's in excess, it's
Yeah.
wasteful. We have things that we don't need, and we have millions of people that don't have just basic necessities that they need because there are other people that exist in our society that have excesses of these basic material goods."
Yeah.
It's gross. Taj, what do you think about consumerism and the relationship with the American people?
I think, in my opinion, I think that consumerism isn't the issue. Kind of like similar to what Daniel said. It's not the consumerism factor. It's the I'm better than you factor. I think that's the problem that we're facing because consumerism culture isn't bad, but the I'm better than you culture is what's killing us. You know what I mean? Like
I would
I'm buying
argue
these
I would
pants
argue
to
that
be
that's a
better than you.
byproduct of consumerism though.
What happened?
I would argue that that's a symptom of consumerism. Like that's a byproduct that follows it.
Well,
I
yeah,
think
I mean, because it does produce things. I mean, but at the same time, if everyone can attain those things, and it wouldn't be a nice thing. It wouldn't be like, oh, I'm better than you now because it's like I can have it too. You
I
know what
think
I
he
mean?
more meant capitalism than consumerism. Like the idea to make and be able to build your own wealth isn't a bad thing, and the ability to be able to buy stuff, but the drive to push you to need to consume to be better than other people.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
and how it
that's what I was trying to say is,
Mhm.
yeah, like I'm gonna buy this hat because it's better than your hat, or I'm gonna buy this car to look flyer than you, and it's just like that's the problem that we have in society is the I'm better than you factor. If it wasn't for that and everybody could attain the same things, I think
narcissism.
it wouldn't be an issue, you know?
Yeah,
But,
okay, I
but
see your
that goes
point.
back to how Daniel said that millennials are the first generation to not have a second set of plates in the house to impress guests. It's like we don't feel the need to impress people. Like, and I'm sure that's the same thing, older Gen Z. It's the same thing. It's like we don't care about impressing
That yeah,
people.
that's not even a concept to me.
Like we don't
Like I
even
can
care.
can't
It's
even
like,
afford
okay,
to
great.
yeah.
Like you got a great job. You work fucking 40 hours, get paid $100 an hour. That's great, bro.
Mhm.
Good for you. Like we wish you well, but we're not like over here trying to impress hella people.
Right.
So I kind of understand that, but I also understand that it is a part of our culture that's deeply embedded in our psyche, like you were just saying. To
In
I mean,
American
not
culture in
everyone thinks like
particular.
that, but I know a lot of people that still think like that because they grew up in situations where like they were poor and they had broken homes and shit, so it's like that was kind of like their go-to avenue of like being like like I'm gonna have the flyest shoes tomorrow to outdo this dude, and it's like that's something that's like deeply embedded in that sort of culture, because
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well said. Oh yeah, what did you have to say, Heather?
Well, no, I was going to say that Taj just made a good point about how it's so embedded. It's like, I feel like for like my husband and myself, we're like older millennials.
Yeah.
He's 40 and I'll be 40 next year. So we're like the last, like year. And I feel like there's a push and a pull, like we
Yeah.
feel like pulled by like, family and what the family wants and what the family does, or we go to like a family party and everybody is like rolling up in their new cars and then we also like, but then we leave and we're like, God, we feel so gross, like this
Yeah.
is not like who we are and we don't give a shit,
Mhm.
and then I also feel like there's a tendency, like among our peers, to kind of put it on our kids too,
That's
where
true.
like where like now it's like, oh well, I bought my daughter, you know, a Benz, and I bought my son, you know, whatever, you know. I don't really know a lot about cars, so you know, my kids are like, yeah, you know, my daughter's like, yeah, I share a car with my mom and my grandpa. You know,
Yeah.
because we don't give a shit, you
Mhm.
know. But then when we go to like, you know, a birthday party or whatever, like a cousin rolls up in her, you know, her leased BMW, and
Yeah.
she's like 16.
Yeah.
And then there's that like pullback where we're like, oh well, should we be, you know, should we be getting her own car too? You know, it's like I don't give a shit, but then there's that pull, you
So yeah,
know.
I like that, Heather. That's really a good point there, because it starts at the small levels like that with family, where it's like
Mhm.
even just family, even just rolling up to a family function. It's like, oh, like I want to impress like the parents and show them that I'm like if you meet a girl, right? And like let's just say you meet a girl for the first time, and or not for the first time, but you're with this girl for a while, and then you meet her parents. Like you're gonna want to make slightly good impression, right? Like
Yeah.
that's our culture. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
good impression. That's what we've been told our whole lives. Is
Right. And I think that the problem is that making a good impression has been conflated from because you're a good person to because you have nice things.
Yep, you're right.
Right, like one of the first questions that you get is like, "Oh, what do you do for a living?"
Exactly. I was just telling you about that the other day. Yeah,
And
that's
it's
true.
funny. Oh,
That's
sorry.
true.
It's funny that you say that because, you know, I grew up in Chicago and it's a totally different culture there. And after like 10 years, we took a trip back, and I think it was exactly 10 years after I graduated high school. And I like, you know, met up with like friends at the bowling alley or whatever, you know, like stupid, like typical Midwest thing. And I go and I show up and I'm, you know, like wearing this like cute, like, oh, hey, I'm from California.
Yeah.
And all these people that like I knew when I was younger are like, what the fuck? And then I kept asking, like, you know, like spouses of friends, like, oh, so what do you do? You know? Um, and
Yeah.
then and then finally, like one,
So
like my friend,
natural.
yeah,
Damn.
my friend Kelly, her husband was like, it's just a job, man. Like, like it's just a job, you know? And that's when I started to realize, like, God, it's so like, why do we talk about that? Like, do people have no more value than what they do or what they have? You know?
I'm at
Not in
Like,
California.
you know, I got to go to the office.
yeah,
You know, but that's exactly what we've been reduced to is
Yeah.
our labor, what we produce, what
what
do
we
you do?
offer.
Right,
Yeah.
right. What your value and your worth is not determined off of who you are as a person or what you provide to your community, but where do you work? How high up the ladder have you climbed? You know,
Yeah.
because not everybody has to be a manager. Not
Yeah.
everybody has to be a corporate CEO. Like that's not everybody's jam. And no matter where you want to work, as long as you're happy, you're being paid well, and you're not being abused. If you don't want to climb up, like so be it.
Yeah.
Like you found your happy place. Like, but it's again, it's that constant drive to need more, better, more, better, more, better, or you're nothing. And so we really need to detach our self-worth from our jobs, from our finances, and from our houses, our cars, our material stuff, and just really start looking at people as people. And not that you can't make a good impression or want to look good for somebody's family, but that's it about being clean and like well dressed. But well dressed doesn't mean money. It just means it's ironed and put together well, right? Like we need to, you know, just really shift the paradigm of what is normal and what's acceptable and what it means to look good or put on a good impression. And I think that like, you know, and I think it's funny because like I keep seeing like repeat like stand-up show after stand-up show after stand-up show about how awful millennials are. But I think that in a lot of ways we are going to be responsible for changing the game in a lot of ways from healthcare to education to economics, how we dress, how we get married. I mean, I'm wearing a silicone ring.
Yeah.
Like what? That's another thing. These marriage and wedding traditions where you have to spend a small fortune to get married, and you have to wear, get this ring and this fancy dress and do all this stuff. And we put on our own wedding right here on Wanimi Beach, my wife and I. We rented out the community center, and like it was, we still had to spend some money, but we made our own table decorations with stuff we got from Michael's, right? Like we didn't go spend thousands of dollars on flowers and a designer.
Oh yeah.
And it was great. It was a great wedding. It was absolutely a great wedding.
That's
and
dope.
We didn't put ourselves into financial destitution to spend a magical day with our friends and family. Like, so I think in so many ways we're pushing back on that. And I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Like you said, we've lost so much. We've had so much ripped away from us. So much has changed that there really is not that traditional American norm anymore. I mean, we're the school shooting generation, we're the repeated economic collapse generation, we're the forever war generation, we're the 9/11. Like, we can't get attached to certain things because so much has changed. And so that's why for us, when all these older people, especially the old, when they're just like, oh, let's go back. We're like, no, back is terrible.
Yeah,
move
fuck
forward.
that.
Now, forward, always. Like, stop going backwards. Back was bad. That's what led us to all this terrible shit that we're living through. We need to move forward.
The problem with society is progress is moving too quickly.
Well, so my only thing is that they're not, like, it's not their fault because that's what worked for them,
Sure.
And it's like I don't blame them because it worked for them,
Right.
It's like, oh, like I got a job, I worked 40 hours a week, I could afford to rent a house, at least I could afford to rent. If I wanted to buy, the option was there.
Yeah,
it's
right.
like it worked and it doesn't work for us.
And that's my problem, is the disconnect. They're like, well, in my day, I could do that. They fail. Number one, they fail to realize how drastically things have changed in cost, in everything. And then also, you used to be able to be a one person income would support a family of 5.
Yeah.
You can't support yourself on a one person income now, like, unless you're in 6 figures. And so you're wrong. You're not wrong that, they, it works for them, but it's their unwillingness to see how much things have changed.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Refusal to allow us to do the things that would put us in a better footing and in a better place. Their absolute obstinacy to let us change anything just because that's the way it was in my day. Well, great, Grandpa, it's not your day anymore, and those things don't work. You can't go down to the corner store and buy your family's groceries for $5. Like, you can't even get a gallon of gas for $5 right now. Like, come on, you cannot equate that. It's not even apples and oranges at that point. It's a banana and a submarine. Like, it's not the same thing. And so the unwillingness to move forward, and also to retire all our 80-year-old politicians. Like, if you were alive during World War II, you should not still be leading our country.
Nah. Nope.
And it's not an ageist thing. It's a times thing. You cannot understand the way things cost, how much things cost, and what we have to do to survive.
Unless they had to start all over.
Right.
Yeah. Unless it's like they have to have something like drastic happen to them,
Right.
Like, I think you guys know my dad lives with us, and he's 78, and he just I think he just didn't expect to live as long as he has.
Okay.
And so he used to be of that group of well, in my day, I could, feed us for $30 or whatever. And then he started to have to be confronted with the rising cost of living, and living more on Social Security alone because of his retirement running out. And then he ended up moving in with us, and it was that drastic event of having to move in with us, because it was you either are going to move in with us or you're going to have to move out of California because of the cost of living. And it was that drastic change that totally changed his mindset.
Right.
And now, and sometimes he'll like, again, like he'll fall back into that, like, well, you know, Heather, in the 1970s, I bought my house for a blah, 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 you know? And then like, it's so funny because when that
Means
happens,
nothing.
I'll remind him like, well, this is not then. And like, you know, this is how it is now. And you see it like in his face, like he remembers like, oh yeah, like this is a totally different scenario now.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they haven't had like that, you know, that bang shock, you know, to them financially, for them to be able to wrap their heads around the fact that things are different now.
Because the
You
whole
know?
system was engineered for them at that time.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And no, that's an excellent point, is that, you know, it takes them like losing everything or being put on our level.
Yeah.
And it's all of the people talking about what we don't need or how we don't need to raise wages or all of these things are all the ones that have money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're right. There are quite a few people in the older generation who are like us. Unfortunately, they're in the minority, but it's because they've hit hard life shit and been knocked off and had to, you know, they kind of got, what is it when you that term? They get knocked down a peg. Like it brought down to us normal poor folk level or whatever, that where they had to make hard life decisions about paying rent or affording their medication or what have you. And so yeah, and unfortunately, none of the people running our country and making the decisions have run into poor life things like that because they're all millionaires. So
yeah, it reminds
it's
me.
laziness. We're the generation lazy. That's what.
But what they say
No,
that
I'm being
but what they leave out
sarcastic.
is that
I'm being
we're the
sarcastic. I was just
no, but so you're right. They say that, but then they fail to leave out that, or they leave out that we are the first generation in American history to be worse off than our parents. We were also the first generation in American history to need 2 to 3 jobs to survive and have a family.
Probably won't retire.
Millennials is also the most educated generation in American history, and they're the poorest.
I'm the
Fun
youngest
fact.
millennial generation.
Yeah,
Like I'm
yeah.
the youngest part of millennial.
Yeah, you are. I'm very much. I'm
oldest.
I'm right at the edge of Gen Z.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
so like,
millennials is basically 80s and the like very early, like I think 92 is like the cutoff. But we're also as while we're throwing this generational stuff out there, Rational National David Dole did a wonderful piece on Charlie Kirk freaking out because we're the gayest generation in American history. Because while only 15% of millennials identify as being proud Americans, 30% of millennials identify as being on the LGBTQ spectrum.
Fully automated luxury space, gay space communism. Brandon, what did you have to say about the relationship between consumerism and the American populace? You haven't talked in a while.
oh damn, I forgot he was there.
Are you still with us?
I was just listening to you guys. You guys just had a lot of good points. I was just listening and enjoying the ride. Ha.
Okay, perfect. So, do you have any thoughts, or can I move on?
I could say like 2 things. So, consumerism. Wait, what was the question again? Sorry.
I was asking about what you thought about the relationship between consumerism and the American populace.
Relationship. The relationship to me is definitely a lot of stress. I feel like consumerism puts a lot of stress on people to, like you were saying, to keep up with the Joneses, or to at least put the allure that you're better off than you're not. Going back to the whole 2 plates thing, yeah, a lot of us don't really care to have 2 plates, but at the same time, a lot of us also can't afford to have a second set of Chinaware, even if
not
we
even
want to have a
something we
second
can think
set of
about.
Chinaware.
I can't even afford to have a second gallon of gas.
Absolutely. So I am not necessarily pro having a piss ton of things, but I'm also not against having a few things, like Daniel was saying. Like, having nice things doesn't mean that you're wasteful. You can have nice things. If you want a second set of China, for when people come over just for a little extra, then sure, that doesn't mean that you're wasteful. Having like 18 sets that you do nothing with, that's wasteful. So consumerism adds a lot of stress for sure, because we always need to be getting like more, better, and then we don't have enough money to fuel all that, and I don't have enough bandwidth to keep up with that. Like, I don't need that crap. Like, I can't keep up with my neighbors, and I'm not going to pretend I'm going to. So I don't need that added stress. So that's the only thing I wanted to add, because everything else that's been said has been like on spot on. So yeah.
Oh, really well said. Thank you.
Yeah.
So in college, I took an art course and studied Andy Warhol, the Campbell soup can paintings from the early 60s. And Warhol's paintings of the soup cans in 1962 were actually inspired by American consumerism. Specifically, the way the cans were perfectly arranged on the shelves, waiting for hungry customers to grab them and purchase them. Warhol noticed them perfectly aligned in a way that would inspire Americans to consume on a mass scale. The artistic style of the soup cans became known as pop art, which was an artistic movement that developed in the mid to late 1950s in the US and UK. What we're talking about right now is the origins of American consumerism. This came out of the post-war period in the 1940s and early 1950s. After World War II, America experienced a massive economic growth spurt, and so consumerism really took off. Artists such as Warhol noticed that the environment around you started becoming the canvas. So you could paint things like mundane objects such as soup cans, and that would be seen as having artistic value. And that was the first time that had ever been done before. Time magazine described the point of view of the pop artists as, quote, a group of common painters that have come to the common conclusion that the most banal and even vulgar trappings of modern civilization can, when transposed to canvas, become art. The pop art movement emerged out of a post-war society that was completely obsessed with consumerism. Actually, I wanted to play a short clip from the movie Fight Club when Brad Pitt is talking about advertising and consumerism. I'm not sure if you guys have seen that movie, but it's a classic.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I'm just gonna play
Absolute classic.
the audio. So give me one moment.
Shh, we don't talk about Fight Club.
My wife was just watching that the other night too. It's really funny.
Perfect. Yeah, just give me a couple of seconds. I'm gonna load the audio right now. Yeah, it's really a speech about what modern life is all about.
I've seen Fight Club the strongest and smartest men who've ever lived. I see all this potential, and I see squandered.
You guys hear it?
Yeah.
God damn it, an entire generation pumping gas, waiting tables, slaves with white collars. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need. We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no Great War, no Great Depression. Our Great War is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives. We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. We're slowly learning that fact. We're very, very pissed off.
Fuck yeah. That's some good shit, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's completely on point. So moving on to a different topic. Actually, yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
So two things. One, that's absolutely apt. And I think that what's awesome about that is I think that perfectly encapsulates what we were just talking about Gen X and how they were raised by, the 50s generation of boomers that had everything, modern conveniences and everything. Life was easy, life was grand. And so they were pushed to do the same things. And so I think that they've, like, while they're not, Gen X hasn't quite been able to buck what we have. That, I think that perfectly describes them. They've been pushed to like you said, the constant consumerism. And something that's just reminded me of, with the Warhol stuff in the 1930s and 40s, also in the 1950s, 60s, sorry. It's same time period with this great American economy and the booming period, and this push for modern advertising as we know it. Toothpaste, I found out, like it's existed since the 1800s, but the modern toothpaste giant that we know, where it's the model where it's got an entire aisle of stuff now. It was all put together by a gentleman who was an advertising dude, was trying to figure out how to get this guy to sell this company's toothpaste. And they convinced people that when you could feel that film on your mouth, that you needed to brush your teeth. And so that, plus in the commercials, I don't know if you noticed, they put this like massive dollar, like 10 times more toothpaste than you need. So not only are they telling you something about your natural body that you could just wipe off, or like in like the book that I was reading about, it said you could do something as simple as like eat an apple and it would remove the film just as well. So it's a natural occurrence of your mouth, but they convinced people in commercials that that was bad and would make you need to go brush your teeth. And so that, plus then, how they tell us how much to use and stuff like that. Like, I remember I was blown away when I found out for laundry detergent, again, you only need to like use a quarter of what they show in commercials when they fill up a full cup and throw it in. It's because they want you to use more than you need so that you go back and buy more. This constant need for more and more and more. It's insane, the levels and the lengths that advertising goes through to dupe us into buying things, and where it becomes, again, it built into our psyche, a norm that if you don't have these things, or if you're not doing these things, you're not normal.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's really on point. It reminded me of this concept that I was actually telling Taj about, because Taj is a big music guy, being a musician. I was telling him that grunge music actually came out of Generation X. And the reason being is because Gen X was the first generation in American history that made less money than their parents. So grunge music was a rebellious response to teenagers that were angry at the material conditions that existed in the country.
I also think that getting back to, though, Warhol and that, that 1950s, 1960s like era of advertising, is I think we also have to remember who they were really marketing to. They were marketing to people that had survived the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody that knows somebody, like my grandparents, they lived through the Great Depression. And a lot of those people, like, they were so compelled by something like, images of soup cans, because they remembered, not having food.
Right.
And so it created
Right.
that kind of like emotional, again, like that that psychological, emotional connection to like those items. And, like my grandparents, like they before they died, they had a home up near Yosemite, and you would go there and they would have so much food. And I would be like, Grandma and Grandpa, like, why do you have so much food? It's just the two of you. It was instinctual for them to just have so much food, because they had that, that experience of trauma from not being able to access food during the Great Depression. Now, look at now. Today, I'm looking at, like I was saying with the Cyber Monday, people are going to spend $2 billion or whatever. And when you look at how much people are spending, like, I think I was texting you guys that I got stuck out by the outlet mall yesterday, and I could not believe how many people were there. And it was like, I'm asking myself, are we like turning into that generation again of people who, couldn't access our toilet paper for a couple months, you know, or we had a hard time, you know, finding the things we needed at the grocery store and it was such a short period of time, but like we seem to be more impatient now too, you know, and so I'm wondering, like, are people going to go back to that too much, you know? I mean, I could not believe how many people, I mean, I've seen Black Fridays before, and that was like I had never seen before, ever, you know? Um, and $2 billion is a lot of money that could do a lot.
Yeah.
You
It
know,
is.
and you ask yourself, like, are we going back to that? Are we going to go back to that hoarding?
We
you
are.
know?
We are. We're gonna go back there. I know we are. And the reason why is because it's gonna take a lot more than 1 year or 2 years of like fucked up shit to change people's minds and to change people's behaviors and patterns that they've known their whole lives. So
Well, and I think it's a reaction too. Like I think we're because we had nothing, people are kind of going crazy now. It's like it's the same thing. Like as soon as restrictions started lifting, like everybody was out doing like crazy, like the burnout of not being able to and being so restricted. And also I would say, Heather, there's still a lot of like boomers and Gen Xers out there too. Like, so yeah, some were definitely millennials at Black Friday, but I think that our generation is even though a portion of us might be totally bought into and swept up into the consumerism, I still think as a whole, overall, as a generation, we aren't gonna fall into that because we just don't even have the means to do so, even if we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but I think the reason I'm saying that we are is because we are, like, you know, like not me, not you, but
I mean,
we
the collective.
as a collective, as
Yeah.
a society. And yeah, not so much millennials and not so much Gen Z, but I know a good majority of people would go out to Black Friday to shop to get things if they had the
Yeah.
money to do it, you
Mhm.
know? And I mean, those are people my age and younger, but it's just like you were saying, like it's a psyche thing where
You need a
it's like,
shift.
hey,
You need a
I need
shift
to
in
look,
the
I need to look good. I need to like throw on some new shoes. I need to have like a new car. I need to fucking look good. Like that's a psyche thing. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
there has to
And
be a collective
yeah,
shift in the consciousness of the American people, like on a
Yeah.
deep scale that permeates across a large majority of the population.
but it's also different in different places.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like in some places, it's like
Yeah, for sure.
that's the culture. It's like I want to look fly, I want to look good, like, you know, because I don't have shit. So I
I mean,
want
we're a stone's toss from Los Angeles. That's the king of
That's, yeah,
materialism.
that's
well,
California
yeah,
culture.
that's the materialism. I'm talking about like just simple things like having like a fresh t-shirt,
Okay.
having like, you know, like some nice new shoes, like even just that for you know, a lot of
Yeah.
people is hard to fucking get. You know, it's
Yeah,
like,
it is.
and it's like, so just having that makes you feel good. It's like, damn, like I got a nice new pair of shoes. I got a nice new t-shirt. Like just something that simple,
Right, because
you
people are
know? And
struggling so much. Like you feel like if you just, I mean, I know, yeah, I agree with you. I feel the same way. Like if I just have my essentials met, I feel good because I know that there are so many people that are completely left out and have nothing.
yeah, there's people that don't even have food in their fridge and can't afford to go out to eat.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah,
I mean, you go to downtown LA. You spend any amount of time there and it'll just break your heart.
yeah, right there in Skid Row. Yeah, I know right where that
Yeah,
is. Yeah,
seeing single mothers just like walking across the street with their children, like no food, just begging for water. It's
yeah.
it's it's horrific. There's no reason this should exist in the United States of America.
No, absolutely none. And Brandon says he's at 1%. He's gonna cut out.
Oh, okay, got it. Um, did you guys have any other final thoughts on consumerism, or can I move on to mutual aid?
Good to go.
You're good.
Cool. So, mutual aid is a form of political participation in which people take responsibility for carrying one another to change political conditions. The term was coined by the legendary anarchist author Peter Kropotkin in his collection of essays, which were titled Mutual Aid, A Factor of Evolution. Kropotkin argued that cooperation, not competition, was a driving mechanism in evolution. He came to this conclusion while recording and observing various species in the wild. Kropotkin, besides being an anarchist writer, was also a trained ecologist. The theory of mutual aid stood in stark contrast to social Darwinism, which emphasized a survival of the fittest mentality. The theory was adopted by capitalists as a means of justification for the elite few to have so much more than everybody else. This also extended into imperialism, and along with that, the extraction of resources, which I do touch on in my episode on Cuba and Hawaii. But in addition, it also inspired the concept of manifest destiny, which led to a direct genocide of Native Americans as white settlers pushed further west. They were also, of course, aided by the head of the state, President Abraham Lincoln, who signed the Homestead Act into law in 1862. Also, fun fact, Charles Darwin never actually said survival of the fittest. Did you guys know that? That was Herbert Spencer. Not only did Darwin not say the phrase survival of the fittest, he actively argued against it.
Interesting.
See, Darwin agreed with Kropotkin's theory that the evolutionary development of a species was dependent on the species' ability to not only adapt to its environment, but work with members of its same species. Kropotkin understood that species needed to work collectively, otherwise they were never going to be able to evolve because they would kill themselves off. According to Dean Spade, an associate professor at Seattle University School of Law and a scholar of the mutual aid movement, mutual aid is a term to describe people giving each other needed material support, trying to resist the control dynamics, hierarchies, and system affirming oppressive arrangements of charity and social services. And some of the ways that mutual aid is different from charity, according to Dean Spade, because I want to make it clear, charity and mutual aid are not the same thing. Charity typically relies on a two-way relationship. So you have to get something in return for for you to receive the benefits of the charity. Mutual aid is different than that. You simply give people what they need without expecting anything back in return. So according to Dean Spade, an understanding that is the system, not the people suffering under it, that creates poverty, crisis, and vulnerability. Governance controlled by people who are most affected can mean having a membership base of those that are most affected or being formed in ways that ensure those providing the aid are from the same group as those giving the aid, or models that allow allies to participate but focus on accountability to those that are being served. There's a transparency in this about how they work. Any money that they use or manage, many mutual aid projects are not funded and are volunteer run. There are open meetings and pathways for new people to join and participate. Political education within the organization to help those working in the project to expand their awareness of experiences that are not their own, to build a sense of solidarity, and to make the project supportive and welcoming to marginalized people. Humility and a willingness to accept feedback about how to make the project more useful to the people it serves. There's a long-term commitment to provide the aid the project works on, and there's a connection to and solidarity with other mutual aid projects and other transformative work. There's also a commitment to dignity and self-determination of people that are in need or in a serious sense of crisis. And lastly, a consensus that is based on decision making rather than majority rule, getting back to that oppressive, coercive, hierarchical structure that can persist within charity organizations. Oh, that was a lot of words.
Yeah.
But in a sense, that's what mutual aid is, and that's how it differs from charity. Do you guys have any experience working in mutual aid organizations or projects within the community? And would you like to talk about some of them? Heather, Daniel?
I do not have any experience working in mutual aid, but I have a lot of experience working in charity. And I can tell you that The thing that really became apparent to me over the years that I did it was, like you were talking about how you had like people that give to charity, they expect something in return,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it could be as big as like, you go to like a charity league event, and people want a big banquet, of food laid out for them and auctions and to as small as just they want, recognition. And I think that that sort of perpetuates like that classism kind of thing, like the I'm better than you,
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving to charity. I remember one time some people I knew from high school, they were out at to eat or whatever, and they ran into a homeless person and they bought him some shoes or something like that, and they posted this long thing on Facebook about it. And it was so like ostentatious, like, oh, look at us and how benevolent we are, and we've given all this stuff to this homeless man, and if it weren't for us he would not have shoes. And it's like, I feel like therein lies the distinction for me between mutual aid and charity.
Mm-hmm.
And so in experiencing, you know, dealing with like charities and, because like churches do a lot of charity
Right.
and I grew up Catholic, and I just I there is that sense of return. But actually, on the note of churches, there are so many churches that like they call it charity, right? But
Mm-hmm.
they don't expect anything in return. Like, as an example, the Catholic Charity, there's an organization called St. Vincent de Paul Society in the Catholic Church. My dad is really involved in the Catholic Church. And St. Vincent de Paul, they gather like, clothing or money or whatever. And I mean, if you're having like a hard time paying your rent or your electric bill or your water bill or whatever, you can go to them, whether you're Catholic or not, and give them your bill, and they'll just pay it for you. And they expect nothing in return, And so I feel like there are like those types of organizations that they call it a charity,
Mm-hmm. But it's actually like mutual aid.
but it really is mutual aid. And then you look at it and you're like, okay, well, so it's affiliated with the church, and the church is, full of, wealthy, like right up the hill at Padre Sarah, they have a St. Vincent de Paul. Do you really think that if the majority of people that went to the church at the Padre Sarah, like, do you really think they'd be okay with the church just giving over money like that to people, whether they're Catholic or not? No.
No.
They would not. So it's like they still even have to bill it as this
Mm-hmm.
charitable, we're helping these poor people, or they don't talk about it.
Yep.
Like, I didn't know that St. Vincent de Paul existed until probably like the last 10 years when my dad started volunteering with them. And that's the only reason I started. They don't even talk about it, because it is that mutual aid kind of thing instead of a charitable,
Yeah, and that's I'm really glad that you brought that up, Heather, because they're consistently conflated. And as an anarchist that practices mutual aid, this bothers me, because you need to clear this up. You need to make sure that people are using these terms correctly. Daniel, do you have experience with mutual aid in the community?
Yeah, so a variety of them actually. But the one that I've been so there's two. So I give a little shout out to the more organized entity one. Food Share of Ventura County is I don't know at the highest levels if it's not getting anything back for it. But the people that run the events on the ground, like there's every Wednesday at Oxnard College, there's a food bank. And it's been going on for almost 2 years now. They started last April, I think, after everything shut down, because they saw such a need in the community that the food banks were, inundated. There was more need than they could meet. And so Food Share stepped in, and instead of because food share just used to take the food to the pantries and then the pantries would hand it out. Food share stepped in and saw the need, and they set up all throughout the county sites where you could drive up. They would put the food in your trunk and you drive away. So it was COVID safe, and all you had to be was a member of the community. You didn't have to show your income. You didn't have to agree to give up anything or go to any meetings. And it's a super awesome organization and group of people that do the local work for that. And then on the side from that, not organized, completely doing it all on her own. I work with a wonderful person named Nicolette Walker, who runs Surge Ventura County. And the last Sunday of the month, we do, I've been doing it with her for the last, I think, like 8 months now, a community care event in Oxnard at a park behind OPAC Theater, Oxnard Performing Arts Center. So it's the last Sunday of every month from 12 to 2. We make hot food and make hot plates for people. There's a table full of clothes, shoes, blankets, as well as hygiene packs, and then canned foods, beans, milk, and when people come up, we don't ask them anything other than, what do you need? We give them bags and we tell them to take everything that they want. Because another thing that also happens is you'll show up and you'll see like, oh, well, you can only take one. And, I get to an extent where you want to make sure that there's enough for everybody at the event or whatnot. But I love Nicolette's mentality that, just as people in general, but also the homeless and the marginalized are so police in their activity that, like, why can't she take 2 packs of wipes? Like, you have a home to go to, and you're telling this person who doesn't know when she might get a bath or be able to clean herself or get wipes again. You're telling her she can't take 2. Why?
Yeah, we're not in a position to make that kind of calculation because we don't know necessarily what everybody needs. Everybody has different individual needs.
Right. And so those are the 2 mutual aids that I've been a part of for most of this year now. One through an organization, but they got funding they made the county fund everything, and they've got donors as well. But so, there's Food Share, and then there's Surge Ventura County, who, like I said, last Sunday of every month does no questions asked. You show up, you get a hot plate. And we end up serving over 100 community members at least on the last Sunday of every month. So the need is definitely still there, and there's some good mutual aid things happening in our community. That's one thing that is great about Ventura County is the community really comes together as best they can to support one another here. And it's not perfect, and there's still some things, but when the people pull together, we really get some stuff done.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Do you guys know what a community fridge is?
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so just for the listeners, a community fridge is a refrigerator that's in a public space that's full of non-perishable goods. And the purpose of it is so people in the community that are food scarce can come and get food whenever they need it. And it also eliminates the stigma, or at least helps eliminate the stigma of people that suffer from food shortages. You can come in and get as much food as you need, and there's a consistent food source for people that need it. And it's a great example of a mutual aid project that could be implemented across the board.
Absolutely.
So
Go ahead. There's a couple right here. There's a new one being built in Satakoy. There's one in West Ventura, and I think there's one in East Ventura as well.
Oh,
that I know of.
Yeah, and I was gonna say in Camarillo, the senior center, whenever they have like bingo or their Tai Chi and shit like that, they do an ad hoc one where they set out stuff for anybody that's there, and it's
nice.
fresh. It's like a lot of produce, so it is perishable, but it's like apples, oranges, and then canned food and stuff like that. And I think that was what was so hard for here in Camarillo during the pandemic was when those things were shut down. They didn't have that multiple times per week event where people could go and get their food. And the city or the Parks District did do like a food share kind of thing for a few months last year, and then it stopped. And now they've started it up again, but they're means testing it now. You have to
Stop it.
apply. You have to get approved. You have
Yeah,
to
that's not
qualify,
mutual
you know.
aid.
No, and it just destroyed the program, you know.
Yeah.
And it's, you
Joe
know,
Biden
it's
got a hold of it.
Means testing destroys everything. Making
Yeah.
somebody prove to you how destitute they are is dehumanizing and unnecessary.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that pissed me off, there was a lot of things, believe me, that pissed me off during the pandemic. But one of the things that pissed me off the most was just the hoops that they made people go through
Yeah.
to get the most basic things, like to get unemployment assistance, to make sure that you didn't lose your fucking health care during the
Right.
middle of a health crisis. Like the most basic things that people had to do just to have those like safety nets above them. It's ridiculous.
And I just read that with the unemployment, they're going back and requiring gig workers and self-employed people, self-employed, you know, whatever, writers or artists or theater people, they're requiring them to go back now and prove that they deserved the money. I just read this the other day in Cal Matters. And so all of these people are going to have to go back to prove that they deserved it. And if EDD or the federal government determines that they didn't deserve it, they're going to send them the bill with a 30% payback of interest.
That's so
I
disgusting.
just,
Fucking kidding me?
it is
Oh
so
my
fucking
God.
disgusting. And I read this article in Cal Matters about it because they were interviewing these people that were like, so this was a gut punch that I have to do this, number one.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just getting back on my feet. Like, a musician, I think, was interviewed, and he was saying, I just got back on my feet, and like, I'm, you know, and now I'm going to have to prove that I deserve the money. And he was like, and then I have to have all this anxiety that like I'm going to get a bill with 30% interest, you know,
Right.
for what EDD decides. And look at how much money EDD allowed people to steal, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, Jordan, like I've seen people that still haven't gotten their claims paid out,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know, that went
Quick
through
note.
so many hoops. Yeah.
And they cut everybody off too. The
Yeah.
extra ran out in September, and I was on just regular state unemployment. I wasn't even on the COVID unemployment, and it ran out, and they were like, "You're done." And I was like, "But
Yep.
I still don't have a job," and they were like, "Oh, that's too bad."
Yeah. Quick note, if they would have listened to Bernie, there wouldn't have been as much fraud.
All of it, yes. Everything you say. Everything you say.
There's a California couple right now that's currently on the run from the FBI for stealing $20 million in COVID funds.
I saw that. And they sent like a goodbye letter to their children.
Yeah.
Wow.
Have fun. We're
but-
going to take all the money. Goodbye.
Right,
Yeah,
but
sorry,
they're
kids.
gonna EDD is more worried about, you know, that musician that used the money to pay his rent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go get a job.
Yeah.
Lazy bums. Fucking
Yeah.
stupid.
I see for hire signs everywhere. You like, that's the thing that just really pisses me off when I see people like say that on Twitter or whatever, because it's like, fuck you. Like, okay, so McDonald's is hiring, like, whatever. This person was being paid like $40 an hour before.
When is
like,
McDonald's not hiring?
yeah, exactly.
Like, okay.
Or Taco Bell. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Or Target. Like, I don't think I've ever driven past Target and not seen that stupid little, like, you know, yard sign that they have, like, in every island about being how they're hiring. It's like, you
Yeah, they're
know,
always hiring.
yeah.
They just over-exaggerated it this year.
Yeah.
Oh, and also there was some paperwork too that came out recently that employers were saying that they were hiring just so they don't have to pay back the PPP loans that they were granted. Yeah, because as long as they're saying they're hiring, they're in the what the fuck, they're in the qualifications to not have to pay it back.
Yes, there's a lot of fraud going on with businesses. And then not only that, because they wanted the unemployment to end so that we would be desperate and go back for whatever wages they were willing to offer us. And we're not taking that bullshit anymore. So, I think that, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier about the massive societal shift that we need. And while Taj is right, it's not complete. I think that last year was a huge, huge piece of it, that a lot of things have been blown wide open. So, I mean, now people have had basically state-run healthcare because they didn't have to pay for their COVID tests. They didn't have to pay for their COVID treatment. They didn't have to pay for their COVID vaccines. How can you justify paying for that as a government, but not cancer? Yeah. What is the correlation? So a lot of things like that, where now you will see people who never before would have argued that the government should pay for or provide any type of healthcare, who are now more open to it. And so things like that. So the employee employer, the power dynamic has definitely been shifted. These, we've been told for so long that they can't afford to pay more. Not only were us refusing to go back to work making them offer us more money, but it also blew the doors off of their lies about how small businesses can't afford to pay $15 an hour. Because there's an ice cream shop that as soon as he started offering $15 an hour, he got over 100 applications in 24 hours. And it was fine. It didn't hurt his bottom line. What hurt his bottom line was not having employees to fill ice cream cones with ice cream. So they're realizing that we are not going to come back and take this bullshit anymore. Not only are we not coming back, but then all the strikes that are happening, the John Deere success that just happened the other day, the New York taxi cab strike that won, like, oh my God, it's amazing what we're showing up and doing. And we're just beginning. So I think that the societal shift, while not complete by any means, has begun. Yeah. Has absolutely begun. Because like you said, Heather, there's people that were making $40 an hour. They're not going to go back, number one, and they're not going to go back and they're not going to take a minimum wage job, especially when they've got like a bachelor's or a master's degree. And they're not necessarily going to go back and take that shitty job either, where they were miserable. I've been explaining this to people a lot recently. People over the last 2 years were happier at home, going into debt, almost being evicted, than they were at their shit job.
Yep.
So, because people were like, I think, I forget who I was talking about this with the other day, but they were like, with unemployment expiring, how are people still living? I think it was you, Heather, who posted it on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I was like, they just don't give a shit anymore. They'd rather be in debt.
Yeah. So,
they'd rather be in debt than go back to their bullshit job. Go ahead, Heather. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, another thing that I was thinking about when I saw somebody posting about the student loans and how they're like coming back for repayment soon. Or maybe it was in that text, about how the student loans are coming back for repayment.
It might have been me. I've been talking about that a lot.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it too, there are a lot of people who will still qualify for a deferment because they're unemployed. And, last year people were like, well, if you want a job, just go out and take, a job at McDonald's. Americans want to work, take a $15 job at McDonald's. As soon as you go back to work, no matter how much you're getting paid, your student loans would come back to be repaid. And so it's like, if you were making $40 an hour before and you've got student loans for a master's degree or whatever, like, you really actually have to hold out for that $40 an hour job. You can't just go work at McDonald's, because if you go work at McDonald's, how the fuck are you going to pay for that shit?
No way. You got to work 100 hours a week.
Yeah, and not only that, that's another thing that's been put into question. So people have been put in a position where, like, again, it's better for them to not go get a job than to get a job. Yeah. And on top of that, you've got other things like single moms. I've got a friend who's a single mom. It costs her more in daycare than she can find a job making right now. So luckily she's able to live at home she was able to move back in with her mom for a little while, but it doesn't make any sense for her to go get a job because she won't have any money, and then she'll be making just enough money that they'll cut her off of WIC.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't work, because it's like, we have 3 kids. One of them would need after school because she's not old enough to come home. And and the younger one, he's only 4. I mean, he's about to turn 5, you know?
Right.
And so it was like my husband was like, you know, the amount of money we're going to spend on daycare. I mean, you're going to work just to have them in childcare.
Yep.
You know, what the fuck is the point of that? You know, there's so many. And in fact,
I mean, you get
I
to
don't
be there
know.
for your children now. Like, you're
Yeah.
not gone at work
Yeah,
40
exactly.
hours a week.
Yeah, but last year especially, like, so many women like left the workforce because it was like, you know, well, first of all, who the fuck is going to take care of these children if the daycares and the schools are closed?
Right.
And so there's like now this national like acknowledgement of the fact that school provides more than education. You know, they
Right.
provide childcare
Yeah.
during the day for parents to work. And if you want to have more people in the workforce, you're going to have to create solutions
Yep.
so that like their kid can be cared for, because you know the school day ends at like 2:30. You know,
Right.
I'm always like, I don't know if you noticed, Jordan, like the fucking school lines at like
Yeah.
2:30
Mhm.
down the street. It's like I always get caught in them, but it's like whenever I get caught in them, I'm like, how the fuck are these people getting off of work in the middle of the afternoon
Yeah.
to go and sit in this line to pick their kids up? Are they, and then
Yeah.
what are they taking their kids? Because there's no bus service in Camarillo either.
What?
You have to
I
live
didn't know
more than,
that.
yeah, you have to live more than 5 miles away from the school, and you cannot have chosen your school. So like if I wanted to send my kids to a school on the other side of town because it's like a better charter school or whatever, I wouldn't qualify for bus service because that's more than 5 miles away.
But it was your choice.
Because it's my choice. But like almost every neighborhood has a school in Camarillo, and there's no bus service for any of those people.
Wow.
So everybody has to have somebody who's available at 2:30 and every Thursday at 1, because Thursday's an early day.
1:00 in the
go.
afternoon on a weekday. Yeah, perfect.
To go and leave. And so like our situation is like my husband works in LA, and so many people work outside of Camarillo. So you start to say like, if you want more people in the workforce, you're gonna have to start providing more supports for them to do that.
Yep.
You know?
And I can go off on a tangent on this
Totally,
for
Heather.
hours. So stop me whenever you want. But this has been my whole argument lately, that it is even if to your bones, to your core, you are a capitalist and believe that our system should exist the way that it does. If you do not have a workforce that can work for you, your businesses will fail. If you do not have a healthy, educated, well-fed workforce, nobody's going to be, your business is just going to go out of business.
Mhm.
If these people don't have somebody to watch their kids, they're not going to show up to work for you. If they don't have, what was the other point? Oh, the other thing is, so along with that is you also have to pay us well enough, because as the cost of rent goes up, as the cost of gas goes up, as the cost of TVs, milk, as the cost of things go up, if you want me to be able to keep affording your gizmos and gadgets, your TVs, your cars, you have to pay me enough to do so, or you're no longer going to exist. So I don't even understand. It's in capitalism's best interest to pay us more, give us healthcare, give us an education, and provide us with childcare. Like, what the hell? It's in their own need to survive to provide these things, and they're still against it. I can't.
Exactly. Like we were talking about consumerism earlier in the episode. Like that's the entire fucking basis of the American economy. Like it's so easy to understand. You give Americans more money, they're going to spend it. We spend money. And even if they did save money, that's good too. But they're not going to. Largely the American public wants to spend their money.
It's not even that they want
Whoa,
to.
whoa, whoa. I was gonna say more too. I was gonna say They would largely spend that money on things that they just need, like fixing their car, like their health care. Like it wouldn't most
Yeah.
people wouldn't be able to splurge on luxury goods. Some could, but people would just be able to have their needs met.
Yeah.
2 points
And
on
you
that.
know what's
Go ahead.
oh,
No, go ahead, Heather.
you know what's funny about that is that as inflation, this whole inflation thing
That's
has
what I was
been
gonna say.
going
Go ahead.
on, I've noticed a lot of people that are more conservative leaning claiming that it's the stimulus checks that caused inflation, that it was people took their stimulus checks and they spent too much money on TVs and shit and created more demand, and that made the boats clog the harbor in Long Beach, and then the prices went up.
I haven't heard that.
Oh my God. So not only is Heather right, but it's not even a conspiracy. I mean, it is, because it's the wrongest you could be about everything. But Biden came out and said that the other day, that he believes his stimulus check caused inflation. So it's not even a conservative made up thing. Even the Democrats are falling into this. And
That's
it's like,
all
no,
coming from Joe
stupid,
Manchin.
No, Joe Biden said it.
I know, but that originally came from Joe Manchin. He's just parroting his words.
Right. But so the craziest thing is that any economist will tell you that the stimulus checks that were sent out last year are the only reason our economy survived anything.
Yes.
And
That's the only reason we even fucking got stimulus checks. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done that. They had to.
Yes. And it's not that we bought more things. It's because people stopped producing things, so there was less available. It's not because we bought more things. It's because there was less produced. Like OPEC right now won't make more oil because they're rolling in freaking dough. They don't give a shit that we're paying $5 a gallon because they've got golden plated monkeys and shit. Like, they don't care. The resources are there. And not that I want us producing more oil anyway, but that was just an example of that the resources are there, and they either have stopped producing or refuse to pick up their production because they're making money off of it. So no, stimulus checks don't hurt the economy. People having money doesn't hurt the economy. People not having money hurts the economy, because then we don't buy things. And what happens, it's not, and again, there's this whole, they've convinced us that poor people are the problem. Rich people are the problem. When you give a poor person $50, they're going to go spend 49 of it at least, if not $50.02. A rich person, when they save $2 million in taxes, they're not going to turn around and spend that on anything. If they do, they're going to put it in the stock market and make money without having to pay any taxes on it.
Oh, this is going to go right in my portfolio.
And what are the poor people going to spend that $49 on? They're going to
food.
They're going to spend it on consumables. You know, they're not going to be spending it on like a yacht. Or, I mean, if they buy a new car, it's going to be like a car that they need to get to work, you know? Or I was reading stories about people that spent their stimulus money on more education or starting their own little business, you know, business licensing fees and shit like that, or equipment for their business. But that allowed people to to pull themselves up. What is it? Pull themselves up by the bootstraps,
which is physically
and
impossible.
Nobody likes that. Nobody likes that, though. Like, nobody, like the Republicans they didn't want to give that $1,400 or whatever to some poor single mom down in Los Angeles, so she could start a business. Like, they wanted her to spend it on food, or clothing, or to waste it on a new cell phone, all their stereotypes, and then get back to work,
Right.
But that's
they don't
not,
want us to better ourselves. They need us to be worker bees.
Stop buying lattes. Just go to
Or
work.
avocado toast.
Right?
The whole avocado toast thing. Shut the fuck up. Like
It's so stupid.
it is so dumb.
Well, and it's like you hear on the news, they're like, oh, people put their stimulus money into savings. God for fucking bid, we have a savings account.
Yeah.
Like, that's the worst thing that happened. Like, I used some of my stimulus money to pay off some debt. Like the last one, the bless you, the Golden State stimulus that we got. I've got a 2001 Honda Civic that I bought used that I was making monthly payments on, and I used that to make the last couple payments. So I was able to use it to pay off my 2001 with 200,000 miles on it. So I used the stimulus money to pay off some debt, and like that's good. It's not good for the people who are trying to make interest money off of me, but it's good for me.
Oh no, the credit card companies.
Right. If I see one more billionaire, landlord, or CEO crying on the news, I am gonna lose my shit.
Who will think of the poor billionaires?
I saw a thing the other day that there's a landlord appreciation day.
Yeah.
What the fuck is that?
We have National Boss Day
disgusting.
too.
What I guess I kind of get the National Boss Day thing, although it's a joke, but the landlord thing?
National
Like,
Boss
are
Day
you
is every
kidding
day.
me? Yeah. Same with landlord.
Yeah.
Landlord Day is every first of the month.
Why do we have a National
that
Men's Day
bullshit?
either? Men are not fucking oppressed.
Yeah.
Like those three days of recognition we do not need. National
Yeah.
Landlord Day, National Boss Day, and National Men's Day.
It's so insulting, because it's like my landlord, like we rent and my landlord is not like doing me a favor by letting me live here,
Right.
by paying so much money to live here. And but they take that tone,
Mhm.
and they use like a management company, and the management company like a couple months ago we had an electrical problem, and I called, the electrician that they dispatched or whatever, right? And I said, I just want to make sure you're going to wear a mask when you come over to my house because I have a 4-year-old and he can't be vaccinated yet. And the guy goes, I'll wear a body condom if you want to go that way. It was like so inappropriate. So I complained to the management company.
What an asshole.
I know, total
Yeah,
asshole.
what
I
day?
mean, that's sexual harassment. I'm sorry. But
Yeah, it
anyway,
is.
I complained to the management company, and they acted like, oh, well, this is the vendor that we use, and it's in our best interest that we stick with him. So deal with it. And it was
What?
like,
What
yeah,
the fuck?
I know. But my point is that like they act like they're doing you this favor by like letting you live here, or they're doing you a favor by like following their side of the lease and providing
Right.
maintenance, and that's kind of fucked up in my
Yeah.
view, because it's like I pay a lot of money to live here, and it's that again, that like classism,
Mhm.
where like they're the landlord class and I'm the renters class, and there's a stigma with it, and it's a mess,
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, and it's not only a stigma; it's a very classist thing. It's a mentality. So a perfect example is we went through this here recently in Oxnard. So, and I'm so proud of Oxnard. I'm so proud of our community. There was a agenda item for rent control to be initiated in Oxnard, in the city of Oxnard. So this was up on the Oxnard City Council. We showed up 80 strong to give public comment on this one agenda item. And I love that one of the callers blasted them because this meeting started at like 7:00 at night. And it was like the third or fourth agenda item. And so you had farm workers that they know have to get up and go to work at like 4:00 in the morning that want to speak. And so we don't know if that was intentional so that, people wouldn't show up. But what was awesome is that 80 people did show up and most of us spoke. And one of the guys, I don't know if he was a counselor or moderator, but even said nervously, because there's a new law that's passed where they have to give you 3 minutes of public comment each person, and they cannot, it doesn't matter, they cannot reduce it. And so the guy was like, there's 80 of you to speak, and if we, each of you at 3 minutes a pop, we're going to be here for a few hours, so if you could please keep it brief. But they couldn't actually, cut us. So we spoke and we kept them on that call. It did take us about 4 hours just to get through that one agenda item. We were on till after midnight. And something that really upset me was something that was sent out beforehand. And the city council didn't send it out, but it was from the West Ventura Business Alliance. And I'll put this woman on blast. Nancy, what is her last name? I can't even remember.
Sweet.
But she's an absolute ghoul. She's a terrible, awful person. And she put out together this whole presentation about how if we implement rent controls, it won't help poor people. It will actually hurt poor people and help the middle class, because then the middle class is going to go buy or go move into the cheaper houses that are rent controlled and steal them from all the poor people. And so her solution was that we need to have people that are wealthier go move into bigger houses to make room for the poor people. And there's not only are there like 15 problems with this, but you're just a terrible person.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
And so not only did we speak and, all of this, and I thought that was just a presentation. This woman actually sat and listened to farm workers and agricultural workers and other domestic workers in this community who are living 5 people to a room and crying while they're telling their story. And she still got on the line and repeated that bullshit. And then landlords are coming on talking about, oh, you're gonna hurt my income if you do this. And my favorite was the last caller. I call her the little old lady from Pasadena. I don't know where she lives, but she was definitely a little old lady. And she got on there and she was like, I hear all these landlords and real estate people talking about how this is going to hurt them and blah, blah, blah. And she said, but correct me if I'm wrong. Aren't you all on a fixed 30-year mortgage? Why are you raising our rent every year when your costs aren't going up every year?
Yeah.
You're giving us a sob story when you are just sucking us dry. You don't have to increase the rent every year. That's a choice that you're doing to exploit people that don't have any other options. And I'm saying a little bit more than she did. But when she called them out, I was absolutely dying. And the best part is that we took them such to task that at the end of that agenda item, one of the council members, a female, I can't remember her name, stepped up and she said, I propose that we vote on the rent control measure right now. And they voted right then and there, passed it 7-0. It voted unanimously, or it passed unanimously. They're going to draft the legislation to be proposed or submitted for approval in January. It's going to be a 5% cap on increase until 2030. So the community showed up. We took those assholes to task. I told them specifically to find their spine and stand up for the people of Oxnard. And they did. And so, hell yeah. But yeah, these people get on there talking about how we make them so much money. I've paid over $200,000 in rent.
Holy shit.
But I cannot afford the down payment to buy a home of my own because I have to pay that. So I'm building wealth and buying a home for another person.
Yep.
And then we can have a whole, and I got to go soon, but we could have a whole nother conversation about corporations buying up entire neighborhoods to try and turn us into a permanent renters class.
Yep.
Can you guys just wait till like 10:30? Because I just have to talk about expropriation for a bit, and then I had some tweets to read out, and then we'll cut it there.
I have to cut out right now, but
okay. All right. Thanks for joining us, Taj.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night.
You too,
Bye,
man.
Taj.
Wait, do you have
All right.
anything? Do you have anything? Okay, never mind. I've been
I
asking
do have to
you on
go
the
soon,
plug
but I'll hang on as long as I can.
Okay. Sorry, Daniel, you were saying?
No, that was it. Go ahead.
Okay. So Peter Kropotkin lays out in his case for expropriation in the essay from 1886 titled Expropriation. And according to Kropotkin, expropriation is the seizure and distribution of the wealth and resources of society from the rich, also known as the bourgeoisie, to the working class. This is, of course, an anarcho-communist perspective and interpretation of the concept. And in taking this definition, which I very much do, we can examine expropriation as an initial redistribution of goods and resources by and to the working class. And this is a powerful step in initiating the final goal of eliminating private property, which is, of course, separate from personal property. And we'd also seek to eliminate monetary exchange and class division. So the reason that I'm bringing this up is because a lot of lefties are falsely equating the smash and grab robberies of high-end retail stores with expropriation for the community. And that's pissing me off because it's not only is it nefarious, it's just incorrect. And I think as leftists, we need to be honest about this. So expropriating goods is about taking resources from like private property sources, like you could say like Target or something. If you were to take like medical supplies or water or food or let's say masks, we're in the middle of the pandemic, hand sanitizer, soap, and you were to expropriate that towards the community, that would be a good example of what this means. People that are just going into Nordstrom Rack and grabbing $500 designer shoes, $1,000 purses, that doesn't serve the community. These people are self-enriching themselves.
So not only that, I love that you made a distinction between private property, between private property and personal property, because when
we're not coming for your toothbrush,
right? When people start talking about and that not just the establishment and the corporatists, but average everyday people with small businesses and stuff, when you start talking about workers owning the means of production and the abolition of private property, they think that means that everybody's going to live on a commune in a farm and that we're all going to live out of huts, that we can't have anything anymore. And there's a difference between private ownership, like BlackRock buying up entire neighborhoods and preventing a person from acquiring that. That's what we're trying to stop, is not that people, again, socialists do not want us to all live in a shack wearing burlap sacks. We want everybody to have a house. We want everybody to have nice things. And so it's not about not letting anybody have anything. It's about not letting a small group of people hoard everything and control what the rest of us do. And so that's a very important distinction. And that's what I found in a lot of things, is that the real work that needs to be done is and I'm trying to stay away from using the word educating, because it's not that it's not about education. It's not that people who don't have a college degree aren't smart and need an education. It's about knowledge and access of information and resources, and about breaking down the differences between, if all everybody hears is, oh, we want to abolish private property, and they only think that then they can't own a house or a car, then of course they're going to be against it.
It's never going to be an attractive option.
Right. But when we sit down and have a conversation about what that actually means, same with defund the police. When you talk about, no, and there are some that are aiming for complete abolition. But in general, the slogan defund the police isn't abolition of the police. Those are different things. And that's why there's the slogan to abolish the police, because they're different. That's why they need different slogans, jerk, because they're fucking different. I know I said jerk instead of asshole, but then I said fuck, whatever.
And defunding the police is a fucking middle ground position, by the way. Like,
absolutely. And that's another thing, is that all of these things that we're coming up, they keep calling these extreme positions, but these are moderate, middle of the road. Bernie was the compromise. They don't even understand
centrist in anywhere else in the world.
Right. What the rest of the world has and what the rest of us want. But yeah, defunding the police is about reallocating resources for mental health and social workers and better schools and stuff like that. It's making sure that our police officers don't have tanks and rocket launchers and AK-47s rolling up into schools. So there's been an intentional misinformation campaign for decades across different policies and platforms. And so what we need to do is have these kinds of conversations, draw the distinctions, and break down the differences, and make sure that people know what we're really talking about. And I think I've talked for too long. Heather had something.
To pick up on the conversations, this is where I become very like very pessimistic about it all, because I don't think that there are many people that are even willing to have those conversations.
Mhm.
They're so
Bad faith actors.
entrenched in their belief system, or it's really about something else, like with the housing, it, I think it goes into things like racism, like you have people that are buying up areas so that they can control who they're renting to,
Absolutely.
or what can be built in their community, or who can live in their community. And the same with, defund the police, they kind of want like that control. And so I start to wonder who really wants to have these conversations. And if they don't want to have the conversations, or if you have like a group that is able to control the message so that so many people don't want to control or don't want to have the conversation, because that's really like last year, that's what we saw, right?
Mhm.
Is that everything was derailed because a very, very small group of smart, political consultants with the GOP. They were able to kind of infiltrate every community with this like, crazy QAnon, defund the police, socialism, like all this crazy shit. And so people didn't want to have conversations. Like in my own
Right.
campaign, nobody wanted to have a conversation. It was as simple as, what do you think about Black Lives Matter? Okay, they're socialist. Black people are affiliated with Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter is socialism, and you're going to destroy our city. And that was it. The conversation was over. So like you've
Yeah.
got a handful of people, like a very, very small handful of crafty people that are controlling this like narrative. And then you've got all the other people that, they're able to influence. So who is left to have these conversations? Um and how do you like break through that, because
Mhm.
it all derails, and you're never able to get anywhere,
Yeah, no,
So
I agree.
I actually have the answer to that question really quick is I have had a ridiculous amount of success when and no disrespect to you, Heather, but you ran as a Democrat, right?
Yeah,
So that's the problem. It
I
has
know.
nothing to do with you, but as soon as they found out you were a Democrat, anything
Yeah.
you had to say was garbage.
Yep.
Period. End of story. And so what I've found is that when I start talking to people, and it's interesting that and I hate to keep going to this generational thing, but I can tell how old someone is by the questions that they ask me when I tell myself that I'm running for when I tell them, not myself, when I tell them that I'm running for office. The older generation says, "What party are you running?"
Yeah.
And even with
Yeah.
that, though, once I say I'm nonpartisan, the majority of people are like, "Oh, what does that mean? What is that? And what is?"
Yeah.
And so they, whether it's out of curiosity or whatnot, their guard is not up. And so then we get to have a conversation. And in addition to, go ahead, what Jordan?
Well, let's say what's funny about that is these are the same group of people that constantly bitch about us being the ones that are spreading division in the country, when they're the ones that are actually spreading it.
Absolutely. And no, that's a very valid point. But so two things with that. So the majority of the people that I speak to, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat and anything in between, once I tell them I'm nonpartisan, I almost always get a conversation with them. And not only that, there's a specific couple of people that are libertarian, conservative, outright Republican that I've been able to engage with, like specifically, and let's specifically talk about Black Lives Matter. And we were this spun out of the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict. I was speaking with a gentleman who lives in Thousand Oaks, who is a supporter of mine, but sometimes has a little bit more conservative and right-leaning opinions and views. But he trusts me, and we've now built up a rapport that I push back a little harder on him than I do on somebody that I would have just met. But he made a comment about how he's really upset with Black Lives Matter and them making a public statement that if Rittenhouse wasn't found guilty, that they were going to riot. And in addition to that, he had problems with them committing violence. And I said, okay, two different conversations to be had here. One, in a way, I can see your point of that, where we feel that a group of people tried to sway the outcome of an election by storming the Capitol, and we don't feel that is right. I can see where you can make a point that Black Lives Matter as an organization making a public statement that if you don't do this, we'll riot, that could be perceived as trying to sway the verdict. And that is not cool. However, you have to understand where they're coming from, where historically and systemically white people get away with violence and horrific violence, where somebody is, for example, a specific example that was brought up was a 17-year-old Black kid who stole $50, got 20 years in prison, but Kyle Rittenhouse at 17 can murder 3 people in broad nightlight on camera with an AK-15, AR-15, AK-47, I can't remember, and gets away with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where their frustration comes from. And I explained that to him, and he could, and so that where, and you're right though, Heather, if they don't give you the time to have that nuanced conversation, then you're not going to get anywhere. And I think that's where we need to pull ourselves out and remove these labels and these partisanship. And that's where we begin to be able to have dialogue. And then again, we still had to be able to have this nuanced conversation, but where he made the remark about how Black Lives Matter was committing violence, I said, no, that's absolutely never happened, ever. That's never happened. Any violence that has been perpetrated or committed at a Black Lives Matter protest was anti-protesters attacking the Black Lives Matter people. Now,
or the fucking police,
huh?
Or the police,
right?
Yeah.
So property damage has happened at Black Lives Matter rallies, but violence, Black Lives Matter has never targeted a person and beat them to within an inch of their life. That has never happened. And then he started to explain himself, and he said, well, there was a group of people dressed in all Black who identified themselves as Antifa, who jumped an old lady. They called her a racist and a white supremacist, and they beat her within an inch of her life. And I said, okay, you've made two very important distinctions there. I said, that's not Black Lives Matter. That's Antifa, which isn't a real thing, but let's go with that. If it was a group of people identifying themselves as Antifa, why are you mad at Black Lives Matter for that? And he said, well, they do rallies with Antifa and they organize with them. And I said, okay. I said, I went to a Salvation Army fundraiser event the other day. Mm-hmm. I said, now the Salvation Army has a bad rap. They've not always done the best things. They're known to discriminate and exclude people, and the higher ups are especially in it for profit. I said, however, our local chapter here has done some really great things, and they're trying to serve our local community. I said, now, because I went to this Salvation Army fundraiser, am I going to be branded with whatever bullshit they've done for the last decades of their existence? And he said, no. And I said, then why, if a group of people that clearly identify themselves, you're saying, as Antifa, then why are you hating Black Lives Matter for that?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
I was
there
able
needs to be
break
those kind of
through.
nuanced conversations. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so
Well-
I was able to break through. And so there are people who you would think wouldn't even have a moment thought or be willing to understand what you're saying. But when you're able to, once you get through and have that conversation, there are a lot of us that are willing to listen. And we're seeing record numbers of people who are fed up with the Democrats, fed up with the Republicans, fed up with, and like you're saying, Heather, earlier, we were talking about nonpartisan. We can't automatically assume that those are all leftists. A lot of those are more conservative, but that still proves a point that in our county of currently, before they redraw the lines, 208,000 registered Democrats and 145,000 registered Republicans, where they just say, and everything else is other. There's 110,000 registered nonpartisan.
Yeah.
That's almost
Others.
a third.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you're right. They're conservative and leftist mixed in there because I'm a registered nonpartisan. But that just shows that the unhappiness, the frustration, the fed up and us being done with the bullshit crosses party lines. And so, and here's another thing, and I'll get off of this in a second, but this is another conversation, and this is a problem, especially on the left, where, you know, there are people where, oh, you can't have rallies with Republicans at them, and why are you talking to libertarians, and why are you can't have young Republicans at your event. And my pushback on that is, are you fighting for Medicare for Democrats? Are you fighting for Medicare for leftists? Or are you fighting for Medicare for all? Well, if you're fighting for Medicare for all, then we're going to need Republicans and libertarians to convince their representatives to vote for it. And so not only are we fighting to give these people that you might not agree with politically these policies, but we need their help to get the numbers. And so this old school, if you're not blue, I hate you. If you're not red, you're not on my team. Like, there's not only are the younger generations done with it, but I'm engaging with more and more older people who are also fed up with the bullshit, because neither party today stands for or represents what it did when they started voting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a conservative party and we have a fascist party.
Yeah. And I think that something you said about how you were talking to the guy in Thousand Oaks about Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and it clicked in my head, you know, so many people, like, they are unwilling to have like nuanced conversation, or they just, you know, they have picked their party and they stick with it because of where they get like all their information. You know, like here in Ventura County, we have in the East County, we have the local paper, the Acorn, which is conservative leaning. They like to play both sides of it, but ultimately they're very conservative. The editors are conservative. The Ventura County Star is a little bit more liberal, but they also make a very concerted effort to hire people that are not political. So, but that's a very small paper, and not many people subscribe to it. Not many people pay for it. Not many people are interested in it because over the years they've come across as almost too bland, you know, like unwilling to report on difficult issues. And I think that that's changing a little bit because one of their lead editors, he's gay, and he's very open about it. And so I think that he's changing the dynamic a little bit.
Good.
That's good.
But Ventura County is such a great example of a community that the majority of people get their information from national news. And getting back to like the main topic of, you know, this episode, the capitalism and consumerism, it's like, who owns these fucking big media companies? Like, you know, and so like you've got like a small handful of companies and CEOs, you know, owning all of this shit, right? Like I just saw that like
I know, and it's so obvious, Heather. Like
yeah,
every single article that's written is just like these. You can tell these people are just fucking clowns. Like New York Times is like Joe Biden is succeeding. I'm like, okay, maybe for you,
but like, you know, like AT&T owns like CNN, Time Warner, like they own like fucking like 3/4 of the information that people are getting. And
Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post.
Yeah. And then people like in our county, for example, they only have access to like a couple small town papers that, you know, are pretty bland, that try to please everybody, that lean a little bit, probably mostly the way politically that the community generally leans, come out once a week. You know, you get it for free on your lawn. You know, only half the county gets it. They really only report on stuff in Thousand Oaks, you know. And then everything else is what they see on Fox or CNN or MSNBC, national news. And so when you're having a conversation with someone, it's hard to like break that barrier down when they are
They literally
attributing.
don't even see the same things as
Yeah,
you.
exactly. Like during my campaign, people were talking about how at the Black Lives Matter protests, there was statues were defiled or
Good.
defaced, and there was looting and burning of shit. And I was like, this is Camarillo. Like, none of that happened. Like, what are you even talking about?
What?
Like,
Right.
where the fuck did you get that? Like,
Right.
and
Right.
like these old ladies in Leisure Village, they just saw it on Fox.
Right.
And so in order to be able to have those conversations, we have to like change the way our community is getting information. Like,
Absolutely.
we need to have more local journalism with a little
Yes.
bit more integrity.
Yeah,
You know?
I mean, the mainstream media, I would argue, was the main reason we don't have Bernie Sanders as president right now. Because just
Absolutely.
every single night, over and over again, Joe Biden is more electable. Bernie Sanders is not electable.
Yeah.
He cannot beat
Right.
Trump. He can't win.
Right.
Every single night, just pumping out the airwaves.
And so I couldn't agree more with everything that both of you just said. And here's what's interesting. Again, that is another thing that is shifting, and for a couple reasons. One, I hate him. We could talk awful shit about him all day, but there's a handful of positive things that did come out of the Trump presidency, and one of them is people no longer trusting mainstream media. And so yes, a lot of them still run and listen to Fox and Tucker Carlson, but even with that, I have seen some crazy stuff where I watched a weathercaster. He was out. It was a couple months ago when the Southeast was getting attacked with hurricanes. And there was a newscaster out there just, the winds blow, whatever. And some dude pulled his truck off on the side of the road and was like, report it accurately. And he's like, it's wind and rain. I'm reporting it accurately. Like, what do you want from me? But that just shows the depth of where people are no longer even trusting people reporting the weather. And so, yes, that also went down some really bad rabbit holes. And then they turned to things like One News Network or One News Network or some shit like that. I don't know.
One American News Network.
Yeah, that.
Oh,
So, but then also to a second point, that's where Jordan and 805 Uncensored and conversations like we're having and people like us come in, is putting out the information so that it's readily available. And this is something that I'm trying to bring into all of my events, is not just have it be a fundraising event or event that just people just come to meet me or whatever, but that at every event there's some kind of purpose and educational. Here's the rental relief stuff in the area. Here's the climate actions that we're participating in. Here's how you can do this, or here's the resources that are available to you. And also, what do you need? Finding out what your community needs, because that's where then you get to have these conversations where you find out that even some really conservative Republicans will get down on Medicare for all if you can, number one, explain it without saying the words Medicare for all, and then also prove how it will actually help small businesses and farmers rather than hurt them. And then they're like, oh yeah, I would be in support of something like that. Like, good, that's Medicare for all. It's HR 1976. Make sure your legislator votes for it. But it's the messaging, right? It's the brainwashing. It's the Medicare for all is bad. But then when you explain the details of it and the crux and how it would help the local community or this and that, then they're for it. And so we've just got to find the path to break in, make it appeal and apply to them. And so, yeah, in some ways we have to appeal to people's a little bit of their selfish nature, but not even just self-survival, right? If a family is suffering and this dude, he's got a mother that's ill, that's going into long-term care, or a daughter that's got cancer, healthcare for all is going to save his life, is going to change his life, right? And so, but if you don't know that to have that conversation, then, so it takes getting to know the person a little bit. It also takes coming from a stance where they're going to listen, and it doesn't work all the time. Absolutely not. I've had people scream at me, pick a side, you're in the way. Like, So, it's not always going to work, but I think that we have to keep having these conversations because people are, as tribal as we are, in some ways more willing to listen to things that they never would have given time before because they've been pushed so far to the edge that they're willing to go down a QAnon rabbit hole. If you can rabbit hole them the other way, so they're all of it. What's crazy is the overlap of support between Trump and Bernie Sanders. The people that voted for Bernie in the primary, but then voted for Trump in the general, and vice versa. Both of them appealed to the same traits: desperate, working class, impoverished, left out, ignored people that have been pushed to our max, our absolute ends of our ropes. And then, yes, some of us choose things for a variety of reasons. Some of it on the right was racism. Some of it was because he said he was going to save their coal job, right? Mm-hmm. So not all the people that voted for Trump were awful people. He was appealing to something desperate in us that is, and it's real and it's tangible and it's still there. And now some of them have woken up that they were abused and lied to by even this fearless leader that was going to walk them through everything, drain the swamp, bring all the jobs back, pull our economy out. They've now seen that they've been lied to. And again, not all of them, but there's a huge portion of Trump voters from 2016 that didn't vote for him again in 2020.
Yo.
But I just saw that in 2024, the polling is now showing that if it's Trump and Biden, right now, Trump will win
in a landslide.
Absolutely.
And I think that it is because Biden has proven to be the exact cog in the machine that everybody was afraid he was going to be.
Well, the elephant in the room right now is Barack Obama. Like, in a world that made sense, if Barack Obama didn't fail on his campaign promises, we wouldn't have even had a Donald Trump.
Right.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And again, you're both right on both points. And so what's most upsetting about those numbers, though, is they don't need to be that way. Those numbers aren't that way because Trump is awesome. Those numbers are that way because the Democrats, and specifically Biden himself, have failed so spectacularly.
And I was going to say, this COVID thing is like, it's going to be the final straw because the vast majority of people elected Biden to address COVID. Right. They did not elect him.
Right. Absolutely.
To do all this other stupid bullshit. Like, I get it. Infrastructure is very important, but not many people give a shit about that. Like,
right. Even though we should,
they're, prioritizing. And it's like, it's starting to come across that Biden is prioritizing things that, like, this bipartisanship. My dad calls it Biden's kumbaya shit. And he'll, like, come out of his bedroom and he'll be like, Biden's at it again. And then my dad will be, like, singing kumbaya, like, at the top of the stairs. And it's like, oh my God, like, think about how many people in his generation and, like, around his age who make up the bulk of voters are, like, so pissed off because now, especially, they're all looking at what's gone on these last couple days and they're like, oh, great. So I'm back to where I was in fucking March 2020.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Biden, who's fucking as old as me, doesn't give a shit.
Right.
You know, and he gives more shit about, pleasing this fucking guy who drives a Maserati to his yacht.
Yep.
Mansion
and so,
or whatever.
Again, to that though, that's why I'll say after this, I'll stop, Jordan. Sorry. But to that point though, Heather, that actually is just, it's exactly what I'm saying. All of these people, but so that's good that all these people are seeing that. The reason and the only reason Trump is winning in these polls is because there's literally nobody else on either side. Yeah. There's nobody on the Republican side that is going to step up and challenge, especially if Trump does decide to step back up. I think Chris Christie is going to try and take a jab at him, but that guy has no freaking spine. Trump played him like a damn fiddle. But then on the Democrats, They're trying to pull Pete Buttigieg and Kamala Harris.
Oh my god, they're not gonna
Of
learn.
course, Trump's gonna trounce
Yeah.
them.
They're so
Even
fucking bad at
Democrats hate
politics.
these people.
But you know what, Jordan, at the very, very beginning of this episode, you were talking about how you think that we might be ready for like a cultural change of,
Yes, a
like
cultural shift
consumerism.
away from consumerism.
Away from consumerism. And you know what, as we're talking about this stuff about Trump, and as like much as he only gave a shit about the stock market, and as much as he is like, he wasted so much tax money like at the golf course, there's still like a huge shift that I can see of people where they're seeing like the policies now with COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, fucking Biden, all he gives a shit about is the economy.
Yeah.
So why the fuck should I give a shit? Or like he promised $2,000 checks and we only got $1,400.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep.
what Biden has done is he has only like invigorated that shift,
Yep.
that shift
Exactly.
where people are just like, my life is of more value than the economy,
Yep.
Yes.
and they probably fall into that middle where like, yeah, there are things that they're going to be willing to compromise if their only other option is Trump,
Mhm.
because to them it's like, look at what we got.
Yeah.
We're what, 11 months in, and
He's failed at everything. He's failed
Yeah.
at absolutely everything. And to that point, I think, and that's why when people tell me, oh, do you really think this is the time for you to run for office? Do you really think that you should be running nonpartisan? This is exactly the time.
Yeah.
Because people need to, number one,
people are done.
people are more fed up with everything in our country than they've ever been, probably since the Civil War, right? Like we are at such boiling points on everything. And yes, I wish it wasn't at each other's throats and it was more directed at the establishment and the elites and the capitalists, the corporatists that are destroying us and pitting us against each other so that they can keep making money. But we're still getting fed up to a point where we're starting to look for something different, something better. And so I really hope that either party or a third party or a nonpartisan something shows up in 2024 to, give us an option to not have to vote for, so that, it's not just Trump and Biden, because if that happens, we're just absolutely fucked. So we
that's the
need,
end.
yeah,
That'll be the end.
Yeah, that's the end of the
Because
U.S.
Trump will win. Trump will win, and then he will not leave.
He will turn our country into Nazi Germany.
Yeah, he will not leave. He will not.
We need to do everything we can over the next few years to mobilize our people to build a nonpartisan and an independent thing. So you can still go vote however you want, but stop hating people because they're not.
Yeah, okay.
Like you don't have to change your registration to vote for a nonpartisan or to support an independent or to support somebody that's representing your values that's actually going to fight for you. Stay a registered Republican. I don't give a shit, but go vote for somebody who's going to do something for you.
Yeah, for real. Okay,
right, and I'm done, sorry.
That's okay, Daniel. I loved everything you said there. I just wanted to finish it off by reading this Twitter thread that was super on point, talking about wage theft and how the mainstream media ignores important stories. And a lot of the things that we were just talking about. So, first of all, I'm going to give credit to this person on Twitter. They're a journalist. Their name is Equality Alec.
Nice.
So this thread is inspired by the gap in what mainstream media treats as urgent and what are the greatest threats to human safety, well-being, and survival. So he begins by saying, for example, air pollution kills 10 million people each year and causes untold additional illness and suffering, and it's rarely featured in the daily news stories. Why? It says air pollution kills an estimated 10 million people each year, but it does much more than that. A long-term threat and what it means, not more than 90% of the world's population is overall affected by air pollution. But the point is, instead of this important news story, the daily news is dominated by crime stories. But even these are crime stories of a very specific kind. They aren't stories about the many air pollution crimes. They're kinds of crimes that are publicized by public police reports, usually involving poor people. Many of the deadly U.S. air and water pollution is also criminal, but law enforcement, in quotes, chooses to ignore it, and thus so do journalists. Eighth, the same is true of water and air pollution and fraudulent home foreclosures, all of which cause huge death rates that kill far more people than what cops call homicides. Now, why is this important? Well, what the media treats as urgent helps people determine what the public thinks is important. It shapes what and who we are afraid of.
Yep.
So he proposes a thought experiment. He says, imagine if every day for the last 25 years, every newspaper and TV station had urgent breaking news stories and graphics about the thousands of deaths the night before from air and water pollution, climate change, or poverty. Take the frenzy over retail shoplifting from big corporate stores, which
Yep.
has taken over local and national news. Same reporters don't cover the $137 million a day that's stolen in corporate wage theft, including by the same companies whose press releases about shoplifting they quote.
Yep.
Take the frenzy over retail. Sorry, I just read that. The media's frenzy has led to emergency actions by many politicians who are feeling intense political pressure to pass laws, assign thousands more police, increase police prison budgets, and project an urgency they have never shown for wage theft. Yeah, so it says right here, Gavin Newsom is promising to boost police funding amid shoplifting increase.
Fantastic. So, Heather, do you want to say anything?
Well, there's some more stuff. Sorry,
Go
guys.
ahead.
It says wage theft is more devastating than all other property crime combined. And unlike theft from big companies, wage theft is by corporations from workers, many of whom struggle to meet their basic necessities of life. It makes people homeless and kids go without food and winter clothes. Overdraft fees amount to basically the same amount of property theft as all burglary, larceny, car theft, and shoplifting combined. Probably not, because the media doesn't report on instances of overdraft fraud by banks every day. If it's hard to grasp the scale of the news silence on a $50 billion wage theft epidemic, how can we grasp the scope of the news daily silence on the $1 trillion in tax evasion epidemic by the wealthy people? $1 trillion every single year is unaccounted for just based on taxes that the wealthy do not pay. And yeah, that's the end of the Twitter thread.
You know, it's funny that if you were talking about the breaking news, because just the other day we were talking about how, like like if you watch CNN or MSNBC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every time they come back from commercial, they say, "Okay, breaking news," but what they're talking about is not breaking news.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Don Lemon will be like, "Breaking news: racism still exists in America." And it's like, it's so stupid. But then when you start like reading a Twitter thread like you just read, you start to realize how insidious that really is. Because what they're doing is they're hammering into our brains,
Our
like
psyches.
what we should think of is breaking news, you know, instead of what is like the real breaking news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
And again, like getting back to like who owns these companies, you know,
Yeah.
and like what do they have to like benefit from, you know, like CNN, like if they breaking news, one new person has been identified in Israel with the Omicron COVID, and it's like, okay, I guess that's a big deal, but also like they are making so much money off of you like thinking that that's like a really big deal, while you know the COVID is totally out of fucking control with the other thing here, you know, the other variant here. And it's like you're paying attention to this other thing because that's what keeps you watching, you know?
Exactly. And that's what the media has just evolved into, this just entertainment apparatus. And that's why people don't trust it, because they know it's just money. It's just clickbait headlines. And
Making
also,
money.
and also going off that, our generation doesn't have like a Walter Cronkite. We don't have somebody that just fucking delivers the news.
No, so all of that, it's sensationalized to keep us watching, keep us tuned in, keep their ratings up. And then it's also dictating what's important, guiding the social narrative. And then it also feeds their motives because, of course, these big companies are going to be concerned with shoplifting because they need to make money. They're paid for by these donors are the ones who are being shoplifted from, right? The advertisers. So there's that. And then
It's just sexy, right? It just looks
Well,
attractive.
yeah, that too. It plays better, but it makes us, like you said, Heather, it makes us care about certain things when, like if you said, if there had been news every day about all the people dying from pollution, everybody would be in the streets right now.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? But
Yeah.
and it's
And what
done
did I
for
say?
a variety of reasons. Their personal reasons, what their boss tells them to say, whose name's on the building, who's cutting the check, what legislation is going to be passed that'll hurt them.
Yeah, I'm
And
gonna
then-
shout out. Sorry, just to cut you off real quick, Daniel. I was just gonna shout out my friend Ian Stevens. He runs a YouTube channel called the Lucretia Report. He has a
Yes.
great video where he argues that we will never truly have a free press under capitalism because
Yeah.
it can't exist.
No, it can't. No. And what did I say like yesterday or the day before? I like woke up and like I get up and I see all this news about these smash and grab events, right? And ironically, that day I like woke up and you know how Facebook gives you those stupid Facebook memories. In my Facebook, oh, Heather, we thought you would want to remember this from like 3 or 4 years ago when there was a smash and grab at the Ulta in Oxnard. Okay. And, this video went viral of, because the employees were standing there recording it or whatever. It was like, oh, keep it classy, Oxnard. Oh. That was 3 or 4 years ago. This smash and grab shit has been going on for so long.
So, and here's 2 points to that. One, again, there's 2 points I want to make about that. One, that instead of seeing shoplifting and a smash and grab as a problem that people don't have enough money to get what they need to survive, it's seen as we're just lazy criminals. Like, again, so they're not looking at what's causing the societal unrest and what we're doing. And then again, the news doesn't want to focus on that angle of it because it's not in their better interest to pay attention to what poor people don't have and how we're being, pitted against each other like that. So they've got to frame it as also, because I think that this is also part of the spin to reinforce that we need police.
Yeah, and it's just
Because
hilarious too, because like the media, when they cover so many of these stories, like it's so obvious that they're just comfortable millionaires in their studios. Like they don't fucking understand why people believe in QAnon. Like they just think that people are just morons. Like they don't understand any of the socioeconomic breakdowns that lead to that.
Right. And they continue to tell us that, this thievery is why we need more police. And this is why, like, they've already been for months talking about how crime rates are going up and it's because of defund the police. When nowhere has implemented any defund the police, it's just talk, but they're blaming it on something that's never even happened, number one. Number two, where are most police?
Oh yeah,
in poor communities.
Poor communities,
In poor communities where they have the highest crime rates.
Mm-hmm.
There's no cops in the high communities and the rich communities where they have no crime rates.
Exactly.
You know why? Because rich people aren't stealing from each other. Because when you have what you need, you don't go steal from your neighbor. And also, if police was a correlation to a low crime rate, then why, having millions of them on our streets in our poorest communities, does that not actually decrease the crime rate?
Yeah, why don't we have the safest country in the world?
It's funny that also
sorry to keep you guys if you got to go soon.
We'll wrap up at 11.
So at the beginning, before we even started recording, we were talking about the redistricting.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole episode I've been thinking about this, how the redrawing of the congressional district, a lot of it has to do with demographics, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at like the district that Jordan and I live in, right? Which is
Mhm.
now different than yours.
Yeah.
It's now lumped in with Calabasas,
Malibu.
Thousand Oaks, Malibu. And so I'm like sitting here and I'm thinking about this, and we're talking about crime, and I'm thinking about how crime has been going up, and I'm realizing how much the demographics in Camarillo have changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how many people are actually poor now in Camarillo. Like the average is about 17 to 20% of people are below the poverty limit in Camarillo now. And so we are like this is what's happening, is like Camarillo is like is the epitome of capitalism, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's got a nice home, you've got your outlet mall, everybody's got the nice shit, everybody drives, the keeping up with the Joneses, like the China that I got, like that's our Camarillo family's whole thing, is like the stuff that we have, right? But now we're still actually becoming like the lower end of our congressional district,
Yep.
right? We have more crime.
Yeah.
And and what is it tied to? The outlet mall, right? That's where all our crime is coming from, is the fucking outlet mall. The place where people are going to spend the money. That's where all the crime is coming,
Right.
And why are people, like you were just saying, Daniel, why are people going to the outlet mall and stealing? Well, I mean, if 20% of the city is poor, like below poverty,
Yeah, I mean,
maybe people are stealing because they can't fucking afford the shit.
yeah, you're gonna bitch about people continuing to steal stuff, but you're not gonna raise their wages.
Right.
Yeah.
Like exactly.
yeah.
We've just lived through 2 years of economic devastation where a larger percentage of us than almost had ever in American history were unemployed. And now we've got Christmas coming. We just went through the school season. Of course, that's why people are stealing. And that's what pisses me off the most, is they just throw more cops at it instead of raising our wages, providing better benefits, making sure that people can afford their groceries. And then on top of that, it's crime. Like they say that, oh, it's just people are just bad people or whatever. And yes, there is some crime of opportunity, but 9 times out of 10, it's a crime out of necessity. And you can tell what a community, I realized this recently, you want to tell that a community is struggling and how or what they're struggling with, go to the grocery store and look at what's locked up.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Here in
Baby formula.
There's 2
Baby
Ralphs
formula.
within a couple miles of me. There's one on Saviors at Oxnard, which is in the more Spanish-speaking neighborhood, and there's one in Channel Islands, more the old white retired neighborhood.
Mhm.
And the one in Saviors has more stuff locked up. They have their liquor locked up. They have their baby formula, their diapers, their medicine locked up. And I'm like, these people aren't jewel thieves. These people are stealing to feed their children.
Yeah.
You don't see a problem here?
Yeah. I shop at Ralph's, and
It's insane, Daniel.
as you're mentioning that, I'm like thinking about what Ralph's has locked up and who shops at Ralph's. The fucking old people shop at Ralph's. And you know what Ralph's has locked up? All their diabetic test strips.
They're probably medicine and little things like that they need.
They don't have baby formula locked up. They have the fucking one-touch test strips locked up.
Because old people that are living on Social Security and their Medicare doesn't cover their test strips, they can't afford it because they're trying to eat cat food and pay for their insulin.
Yep. Yeah.
So yeah, you can tell what portion of your community is struggling by looking at what's locked up at your local grocery store.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you guys just said.
All right, how do we button this up?
I don't really have any final thoughts. You guys want to plug your stuff real quick, and then we can wrap it up? Whoever wants to go first. Heather, you want to plug your blog or whatever?
Head to my blog, heatherchristinaschmidt.com. I'm publishing my tell all about running for city council before the end of the year. So It'll be there, and it's going to be free, and fuck it.
Awesome. check it out, listeners. She's a really talented writer.
I
Thank
cannot wait
you.
to read this. I cannot wait to read this tell all.
Daniel, you have anything you want to plug?
All right, awesome. So, hi, everybody. Daniel Wilson here. Please go to votefordaniel.com. Check out all of my social medias at Daniel for VC right there. I'm actually running for state assembly to represent us right here in Ventura County. I will be running in the western portion of the county, which is going to be the new assembly district. So check out votefordaniel.com and follow me at Daniel for VC on everything. Thank you so much, guys.
Awesome. Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having me on.
Anytime. You guys have a great rest of your night.
Oh, and also subscribe, hit the bell wherever you're watching Jordan 805 Uncensored. Make sure you follow him. This is the real deal here. We gotta keep having these conversations and getting this stuff out there. That's how we change hearts and minds.
Thank you so much, Daniel. 805 Uncensored is on Twitter at 805 Uncensored. I'm also on Instagram at 805 Uncensored Pod. And if you want to email me to ask a question or have any guests you'd like to suggest, you can email me at 805uncensored@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody, and have a great night.
You too.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.